I would like to welcome you all to the first annual Sukkot Conference of Torah. אני גם רוצה להתנצל שההרצאות והדיון יהיו באנגלית. I hope that in the not too distant future it will be possible to invite many Americans who come for Yom Tov to a conference of this nature in Hebrew. Now you still cannot hear me? Now it's better, I hope. Okay. And I can think of no more fitting time to discuss the question of Jews and Arabs than the festival of Sukkot. If you count up all of the korbanot, all of the sacrifices that are brought during this period, they add up to 70 sacrifices. According to our sages, Keneged Shivim Ha'umot, corresponding with the 70 nations of the world. So that there probably is no better time for evaluation and re-evaluation of our position vis-a-vis the Arabs than the festival of Sukkot. For the first address this morning, it gives me great pleasure to introduce my colleague, with whom I share the distinction of being Rosh Yeshiva of Yeshivat HaMiftar and Mechnelet Puria. Someone who came to Eretz Yisrael long before I did, to a certain extent, began the work, especially in terms of Balei Tshuva here in Israel, is responsible really for the creation of the yeshiva for men as well as for women, which teaches young men and young women the kind of Torah and the kind of Torah attitudes which has generally been in consonance with what we call centrist orthodoxy, who pioneered the whole area of teaching Torah to women, Torah shebichtav as well as Torah shebal peh. So it gives me great pleasure for the first address this morning, Harav Chaim Rav.
Moadim l'simcha. Thank you, Rabbi Riskin. Now, when I first entered into this partnership with Rabbi Riskin, I used to be sent from time to time to replace Rabbi Riskin at places that he had agreed to be, but because of physical limitations of space and time, was unable to come. So I used to go and say, well, I was also Rabbi Riskin. And then everybody would listen. But today is the first time that I'm speaking on the same bill with Rabbi Riskin. So everybody knows that I'm not Rabbi Riskin today. I hope it works out. It's important that we agree as to what it is we are speaking about, and perhaps even more important, what we are not speaking about. What we are not speaking about today is the topic of Jews and Arabs at war. War is certainly an unfortunate circumstance, and it doesn't really make any difference who it is who has decided to destroy the Jewish people. We have an obligation which we've exercised in different ways on different occasions here in the state of Israel to defend ourselves, and Baruch Hashem, we've defended ourselves well against anyone who would try to destroy us. So that's not our topic today. We're not concerned so much about war because paradoxically, unfortunately, war is the simpler situation. When there is war, there is no choice, and when there is no choice, you act in a clear and determined manner. The distinctions between the various types of wars that the halakha recognizes, important in themselves, Milchemet Rishut, Milchemet Chovah, Milchemet Mitzvah, distinctions which, as I say, are important in themselves, do not concern us here. Because they do not concern the relationship between Jews and Arabs that is beginning to be our real concern. For the question of how the Jews will get along with the Arabs is not a question of war, but is a question of peace. I assume that peace will come. To me, assessing the situation with whatever means I have, having observed as well as I can, though there may be some of you who disagree, it seems to me that peace is already at hand. True, there will be some disagreements as to the style of the agreement, who will talk to whom, when will they speak to each other, who will be given the final credit for organizing some meeting that will take place in secret and be denied. But it seems to me that peace, as peace is conceived of in the world today, I'm not speaking about a true peace, nor am I even speaking about a prophetic peace. I'm speaking about the kind of peace where people agree not to go to war with each other for whatever reason. I think that kind of peace is something which is on our doorsteps. Assuming that this formal peace will come, what are the options of the Jewish majority in the state of Israel? And I say to you, I assume, I see no other way. I assume that we maintain our commitment to the political system known as democracy, though I don't want to involve myself here with a discussion of our democracy versus somebody else's democracy, but in principle, I think we would all agree that our expectation is that the government, that the state of Israel will maintain a commitment to that which is known as Western democracy. I don't think anybody would agree to trade in democracy for a less liberal form of government, even if it seemed that the less liberal form at first had ideals similar to mine. How are we in that case to organize ourselves in peace, assuming a Jewish majority and a non-Jewish, specifically Arab minority? I mean, how are we to organize? Now, whenever you think about a problem, whenever you go about to solve a problem, you do it within some kind of context. I mean, you start out with rules or precepts or goals or notions within which the problem has to be solved. What I would like to do is present what I think, with my limited vision, is a Jewish context, a Torah context, for solving or dealing with the problem. Large Jewish majority and large Arab minority in Eretz Yisrael. So what we have to do in order to get our parameters clear is relate ourselves to the Torah, both as halacha and as agadah. And I'll try to explain. Halacha, for us, for most of us, are the do's and don'ts of things, right? We are now involved in a massive halachic enterprise called Sukkot, right? Every one of you has a sukkah. Every one of us in Eretz Yisrael somehow fulfills this mitzvah in a wonderful and a wondrous manner. And we all know that there are halachic problems. I mean, you would think that if people would set out to make a house that didn't consist of anything that would last too long, that the problems you could create would be minor, but in fact, you know that the Jewish genius is able to be confusing about what kind of walls to have, and what kind of roof to have, and is it shaking too much or is it shaking too little, and what happens when the wind blows and when the wind doesn't blow. I mean, you know very well, especially if you have the very good fortune of having teenage children who go to Jewish schools, who are always happy to come home with the latest information about what their parents are doing incorrectly, then you know that sukkahs can be an annual problem. The trick is, of course, I mean, if you haven't learned it yet, to have your children build the sukkah any way they wish, you know, and join them happily when the time comes to do the mitzvah. So we're all involved in halakha. And halakha refers to rules. And while it's true that not everybody seems to agree about what the rules are, everybody seems to think that you've got to have a set of rules. The Agadah, on the other hand, we associate in our minds with, I would say, nice things that rabbis might say in the synagogue in an attempt not to get anybody too angry. Well, you know, Jewish values, notions, ideas, you know, the kind of things that your children do not come home and bother you about. But the kinds of things that we always think we would like to be involved with educating them towards. Now, I want to tell you that there's really a paradox in our lives. Because halakha, at first, seems to us to be very cut and dried. I mean, after all, if there is a halakha, and the halakha is how do you do it, and you went Erev Sukkot to buy your lulav and etrog, and you went over to the guy selling the lulav, and you picked one out, and you figured, I mean, he's selling it, he must know, right? And you say to him, is it long enough? So he would probably say to you, well, how long do you think it has to be? And if you said, is it green enough, he would say to you, well, how green do you think it has to be? Etc., etc., etc. And what he was saying to you is, you decide, because there are different positions. So that paradoxically, what happens is, if you think about it carefully, even though the halakha at first may give us the impression that it is cut and dry, and contains and consists of very clear and arbitrary positions, we all know that often this is not the case, that the halakha is in fact not at all cut and dry, but relates itself to reality, and therefore it's never enough for us to look into a handbook or a pamphlet of halacha to make the determination of how we should act, but it's important for us to consult with somebody who has a wider view and can apply his vision to the halachic issue at hand within the context of the situation. On the other hand, Agadah, moral and ethical Jewish positions are often very clear and easily acceptable by all the Jews. So that what we have is a paradoxical position. If somebody comes and says to you, the halacha is, that we have an obligation to do A or B, and even quotes a particular halachic statement, be suspicious. Because that's not how it works. The halacha is represented by halachists who are able to make determinations about specific situations within a broader context, and we will come back to this point. As I said, I believe that the Agadah has the capacity to determine in very clear, broad strokes where the Jewish people should be heading on particular issues. And so that often clarity comes to us through non-halachic sources, and in the long run, the halachic process may even, and here I say what I am saying, but I want you please to quote me with mercy. It says, often the halachic process takes its lead from the agadic notions. And the halachis will be prepared to determine the halacha within the context of broader, more important notions. I mean, if I would take an example, of how the halacha determined Jewish life in a very special way, based on the context, and how Agadah is trying to work to change that determination, I would take the example of Ribit. As you know, giving interest, taking interest, seems to be forbidden by the Torah. Some of you here may have bank accounts. You may have noticed that from time to time they charge you interest. I mean, I assume nobody is in the black, so you're not getting any interest, but from time to time they charge you interest. And this process seems to be accepted by the totality of the Jewish people. Every single, I don't know any Jewish group that doesn't have bank accounts. And so somehow the halacha has adapted itself to reality in a way that enables us to take and give Ribit. Of course there are certain processes that have to be enacted, but we can do that. On the other hand, the Agadah in this case is violently against giving up the mitzvah or the isser of Ribit. And it may be that we will see in Eretz Yisrael Jewish Agadah, or the Agadah of Torah, which maintains a very, very deep-rooted interest in the prohibition against Ribit, forcing the halacha slowly to maintain some semblance of this isser in the Torah. So what we want to do is look into the two aspects, the halacha and the Agadah. And we want to see whether we can devise for ourselves a kind of a program for Jewish and Arab relations in a democracy, in a time of peace. Okay. Naturally, what we're concerned with is the category of person called the ger Toshav. The Ger Toshav is a person who is described by two things. He's a Ger and he's a Toshav. Ger, the word Ger in this case means that he's not entirely part of our people. And the word Toshav means that he is a resident amongst us. That's what a Ger Toshav is. Now a Ger Toshav is a non-Jew who has accepted certain mitzvot and who has the privilege of living within our midst in Eretz Yisrael. The halacha demands that he accept these mitzvot before a Beit Din, and that he has to agree not to be idolatrous, or the machloket, either not to be idolatrous or actually to accept the Sheva Mitzvot B'nai Noach. It was the crux of the definition of a Ger Toshav is that he is a person originally in the halacha who has gone through a process. Not somebody who just wanders in and says, I like it here, it's a great place, I'm a good person, I'm not bothering anybody, I'll just, live my life quietly. But a Ger Toshav seems to be a person who has gone through a formal process, almost a conversion. But a convert becomes a full-fledged member of the Jewish people, and the Ger Toshav becomes a kind of an associate member. He's able to live in our midst, and I will elaborate on what living in our midst means. But what I want to make sure that you understand is that the halakha, in its original, the way the Gemara presented the halakha says that the Ger Toshav has to go through a process. He has to be accepted. It's not enough to have good intention, but there has to actually be a Beit Din. There has to be a court, and the court has to accept him, and they have to see him as fulfilling the minimal obligations. Those minimal obligations are either machloket, either a denial of idolatry, or the actual acceptance of the 7 mitzvot that are called the 7 mitzvot b'nei Noach. The Rambam adds, in elucidating this particular point of acceptance, he seems to say that the reason that the Ger Toshav has to accept and be accepted before a Beit Din is, and these are the words of the Rambam in Hilchot Melachim, according to the corrected version, the Rambam says that a Ger Toshav has to be as he is, in other words, a non-idolater or an acceptor of mitzvot, because mipnei shetzivah b'hem HaKadosh Baruch Hu b'Torah. In other words, he has to come and say to us, look, I want to be this way because I think God wants me to be this way. I want to live this way because the Torah wants me to live. I don't want to be a Jew. I don't feel the need to be a Jew, but I recognize that HaKadosh Baruch Hu has demands on us as human beings, and I recognize the fact that these demands that HaKadosh Baruch Hu made on us should be accepted by all Jews and non-Jews alike. And I want to accept them. So that the Rambam says, if a person if a person shows up here in Eretz Yisrael, and he's a good person, he's a humanist, or he's a Christian scientist, or whatever he is, and he does good things. He's not an idolater. He keeps all of the 7 mitzvot de facto. The Rambam says that would not be sufficient to make him into a Ger Toshav, but he would have to go through a process. Just as every convert has to go through a process, so too would the Ger Toshav have to go through a process. Now, I think that this halakha, if we would engage in this kind of game of reading halachot in the Rambam and presenting them as the Jewish position in an ultimate sense, then this halakha itself would deny any kind of future, democratic future for the state of Israel. I mean, I cannot imagine that we could go out, have little kind of squads running around in Arab villages and saying, you could stay. All you've got to do is join. In order to join, you've got to go through a little process. We'll have, twice a year, we'll rent a big hall, and everybody will come forth and declare themselves for the Torah. I just don't see a future for the democratic state of Israel within the context of this Rambam. However, as I said, halakha as it is formulated, even by the Rambam, always gives me general principles and gives me what the idea is. Tells me what the notion of Ger Toshav is. However, it does not always clearly elucidate how it is practically that I am to act. Rav Kook, who I think, sometimes I am not sure, but Rav Kook, Rav Avram Yitzchak HaKohen Kook, right? The person that most people refer to when they say Rav Kook, Zerech Tzadik Livrocha, Rav Kook probably cannot be accused easily of being interested in the destruction of Jewish settlement in Eretz Yisrael. Nor, I think, can Rav Kook be easily accused of not taking halakha, the Rambam specifically, seriously. And yet, Rav Kook was asked to address himself to the problem of Ger Toshav in Eretz Yisrael. And Rav Kook wrote in one of his tshuvot as follows. He says, it may be that the two positions presented in the Gemara, remember, let's go back. In the Gemara, there is a difference of opinion as to who is a Ger Toshav. One opinion says anyone who rejects idolatry can be a Ger Toshav, and the other opinion is that anyone who accepts the 7 mitzvot is a Ger Toshav. Along comes Rav Kook, and Rav Kook says perhaps the two opinions in the Gemara are really not irreducible distinctions, but we can somehow use these two opinions in order to formulate a worldview. And he says, a Ger Toshav, who is one of, in order for a Ger Toshav to be called Chasidei Umot HaOlam, one of the noble people, one of the Chasids of the world, one of the non-Jewish Chasidim, he would have to accept all of the 7 mitzvot and do that, go through that process in a way that would be recognized by a Beit Din. However, the Rambam says, Rav Kook says, it may be that if we are only speaking about what does a Ger Toshav, or what does a non-Jew have to do in order to be accepted for residence in Eretz Yisrael, for living in Eretz Yisrael, he says perhaps it is sufficient that he's not an idolater. Perhaps it's sufficient that he's not an idolater. Now, I won't belabor you with the rationale for Rav Kook's distinction. However, I would like immediately to turn to the other aspect of Jewish thinking, that which I called Agadah, and quote something that the Rambam himself wrote. Remember, the Rambam I presented as a hardliner. The Rambam said a Ger Toshav, he said living in Eretz Yisrael is only possible if you actually accept the mitzvot in a formal manner. Something which is probably not possible today. Rav Kook took a somewhat different position, and he said that the acceptance of the mitzvot is necessary to grant you status of Chasid Umot HaOlam, a very special kind of status. But if you have rejected idolatry, that is sufficient to enable you to live here in Eretz Yisrael. The Rambam, at the end of Hilchot Melachim, in a halacha, when he discusses the Messianic era, the Rambam wrote a paragraph that was censored. And this paragraph, subsequently reinstated in the Rambam, in the Mossad Rav Kook editions, and other editions that include the censored portions, the Rambam relates to Christianity and Islam. And the question that the Rambam is answering is, like sort of here, Hilchot Melachim, the Rambam says, the Messiah will come, and it'll really be terrific, and the nations will not subjugate the Jews, and the Torah will be taught everywhere, and everybody will see the light. You've heard this description now and then. The Rambam, waxes poetic about Yemot HaMashiach, and he gets sort of to the end of the chapter, and he realizes that there may be a nudnik in the audience. Nudniks are the people who always ask the questions that the teachers dread. And they hope that if they classify them as nudnikim, they'll go away. But they just don't go away. So there's a nudnik. The Rambam is writing. I suppose it's late at night in his apartment, wherever he lives, he's writing the Hilchot Melachim, and he's at the end. The end of this tremendous work. He's at the last chapter, and there's a nudnik in his head. And the nudnik is saying as follows. Why does HaKadosh Baruch Hu run Jewish history so that the end is going to be so terrific, and the middle is got to be so bad? He says, why is it that everybody is going to recognize God, the Torah, the mitzvahs? Everything's going to be great at the end. Just for a few thousand years, hold your breath. He says, why couldn't it rather be that as we went along in history, we get a report, of some Mongolian tribes deciding for Torah, or some African Zulus going for Torah. Why is it that they all go elsewhere? After all, if we've got it, we've got it. We've got the Torah, and the Torah is the truth. How come Paul was so successful selling second-hand cars? He went, millions and millions, they all went for it. Not to speak about the fact that the Islamic conquest, lacking a little of the finesse that Paul must have learned when he was still, in Cheder or something, They just ran around all over the world and conquered everybody they could see. And it went, halach. This halach. They conquered you. They said, now you're all Muslims. And they're still Muslims today. They're still Muslims. So there's the nudnik. There's a nudnik. He's in the Rambam's head. And the nudnik is saying, if it's going to be so good at the end, why can't it be a little better now? Ma yesh. We have to it all has to be one day. We all read what the Navi Zechariah said, that it's going to really be good. So I wonder what the Navi Zechariah was thinking when he was looking at his little Beis Hamikdash that wasn't really as big as it might be. So there's that. Now, the Rambam here is important because the Rambam is the one who is the supposed hardliner. The Rambam is the one who is being changed or finessed by Rav Kook, so to speak. So it's important to know what the Rambam thinks about our history. And in this halakha, which was censored, the Rambam says as follows. He says you should know the Rebbeinu Shalom is right. This may not sound like a big deal to you, but from time to time, it has to be mentioned. So the Rambam says, the Rebbeinu Shalom is running the world in the right way. And we don't always understand why things are the way they are. I mean, you understand. The Rambam was a philosopher. So he understood that he didn't understand. I mean, he just didn't not know, but he understood that there were things that you don't understand. He says, and all of these things about Yeshua HaNotzri, right? He wasn't as frum as the people who don't mention his name. Listen, I mean, unless they tricked me here, Mosar Cook. And Zeha Yishmaeli Shamal Acharab, his name he didn't mention. He didn't like it. So he says Jesus and Muhammad. He says, understand how God is organizing things. They have come onto the scene of world history. The Rambam, Einon Elo liyasher derech lemelech hamashiach uletakein olam kulo la'avodat Hashem biyachad. They have come to prepare the way for the Messianic era. They have come letakein, to fix the world in order that we should be able to serve God together. And what does the Rambam mean? It's simple. The Rambam says, I'm not quoting the Rambam. I'm not quoting the Rambam. It says, what would happen if we would decide that we have to go and convert the entire world, right? We have to take paganism out of the entire world and bring them to the recognition of God. So no. So we'd all have a job. It's a big world out there, right? Millions, hundreds of millions, billions, who knows how many people there are who need that kind of service. So who would learn Torah? Who would sit in the yeshiva? Who would build a sukkah? Who would do mitzvahs? I mean, we'd all be out there running around like little, I don't know, little energetic beavers, changing the entire world. I mean, how would we get it together where we're supposed to get it together? Who would be keeping the Torah? I mean, we've been all out there doing other things. So the Rambam says, stand away from world history and look around and see what's happening. He says, against our wishes. Against our wishes. I mean, after all, Jesus came from wherever he came, from a manger. I don't know what a manger is exactly. He came from a manger. He came to Shalayim, and he had a few nice vertlach. You know vertlach. He was he learned a little bit of Torah. I mean, he wasn't the best guy in the shir. He learned a little Torah. He had a couple of vertlach, and he even had some social consciousness, right? And he came to the Jews, and he said, listen. Let's get it together. Let's have a little Messianic era. I'll be the Messiah, And the Jews said, no. Not interested. You didn't learn enough. You don't give good enough shiurim. You're not a good enough speaker. You were born in a manger. I mean, They said whatever they said. Now, this has happened other times in Jewish history. It's happened other times in Jewish history. Somebody came along and said, listen, ich bin, here I am. I'll take care of everything. And rejected. People said, look, you're a nice fellow. But, if we had an insane asylum, we'd put you in the insane asylum. So, understand. When Jesus came to the Jewish people and said, ich bin, so the Jews said, no, it doesn't strike us, right? We also learn that we have Rabbonim and Dayanim, and it doesn't work out. I mean, it's not an easy call, believe me.
I mean, it's not so easy to know if somebody is the Mashiach or not. But they decided no. So he could have passed on. I mean, world history could have forgotten him. You know, somebody could have dug him up, made a little dissertation about somebody walked around Yerushalayim and didn't make it. He made it. But not with the Jews. He didn't make it with the Jews. So the Rambam says. The Rambam says like this. He says, what would happen? What will happen in the end of days? When the Mashiach HaEmes comes. When the true Messiah comes. And that true Messiah says, Herzu, this is it. The end of days. Now, whatever that means, you know, everybody will have plus in their bank accounts. Business will be good. Everybody will be happy. I don't know. The end of days, it'll be great. So the Messiah comes and says, everybody recognize the Messiah. So we, for all those years until the Messiah came, I mean, we're learning Torah, right? We're learning Torah. A little Baba Kama and Baba Basra, you know, we're learning. So the Messiah says to all the Goyim who are pagans, right, pagans, because what do they know? We're learning and they're going along their merry way. And they say, listen, the Messiah says to the pagans, you've all got to come right away and join up in the yeshiva. So they say, okay. They all come to the yeshiva. They walk in, what are the Jews doing? They're learning Hakiras and Chazokas and Baba Basra and Sukkah. Can you have the schach this way or that way? Can you imagine? They start teaching, you walk to a shir and they learn about Dofen Akuma. You know what Dofen Akuma is? Dofen Akuma is, you go to yeshiva, any yeshiva in Yerushalayim. You see kids sitting and learning. The Rebbe says to them, it looks like a ceiling, but it's a wall. So all the kids say, what? What else would you think it is? Because it looks like a ceiling, I would think it's a ceiling. I don't think it's a ceiling until you tell me what it is. You tell me it's a wall. It's a wall. That's called Dofen Akuma. So you imagine all the pagans in the world come into the yeshiva, and they see all the Jewish children. They're all sitting there and they're saying, it's not a ceiling, it's a wall. I mean, you understand that there would be a conflict of interest, of language. I mean, here's the Mashiach saying, going to the yeshiva. And here's the yeshiva that tells that the ceiling is a wall. So that the messianic process would be problematic. So the Rambam says, now look in history. Look what happened in history. Look what happened in history, the Rambam says. The Rambam says, you look in history, you see, along came Jesus. And as I said, his father was a laborer, his mother was in a manger, I don't know, you know, a regular person. He went out and he did something great. So the Rambam says, he did something great. You know what he did? There are hundreds of millions of people. I read someplace recently that the Bible sells 100 million copies annually. I mean, that's a lot. I mean, it's a lot of copies. Now, the Bible, 100 million copies. So he says, so there are like all these goyim in the world buying Bibles. Now, what do they all say about the Bible? What do they all say? I mean, I don't know exactly. But I mean, more or less. They say there's an Old Testament. Right? Old Testament, there's a Torah. And go and ask a goy, where did the Torah come from? From God? Who brought the Torah into the world? Moshe Rabbeinu. What does the Torah consist of? Mitzvot. That God wants you to do. Every single guy in the world. I mean, it's like unbelievable. The biggest Baal Tshuva movement imaginable. Every guy. And so you say to the guy, so, Torah, Moshe Rabbeinu, God, mitzvahs, how come you don't do that? So, because there's Torah B. Torah B. But if Torah B did not cancel out Torah A, there would still be Torah A. So the Rambam says, when the Mashiach comes, all the Mashiach has to do is prove to everybody that he's the Mashiach. And the last Mashiach, or what anybody says was the Mashiach, it never happened. And if it never happened, then what else never happened? So Torah B never happened. So what have you got left? So you got Torah. So in other words, history. This is what the Rambam is saying. He says history is educating the world, is preparing them for the coming of the Mashiach. That's what the world's at. Even though the preparation is not what we would really like to see. It's not the way the world really should be. Still, if you look at history in a kind of a long picture, you see that we're all moving in that direction. And the same thing is true, of course, about the Quran, which was very heavily influenced by Jewish writings, especially the Chumash. So the Rambam says that a person who has rejected idolatry, a person who has taken a position within history, preparing the way for the coming of the Mashiach is definitely a part of a process that has to be seen in the most positive light. For some reason, the Christian or Jewish censors thought that leaving this in would be problematic. It was taken out. So Rav Kook said that it may be that a Ger Toshav who rejects idolatry gains the right to live within our midst is perfectly in sync with a greater notion that the Rambam himself elucidated. And that notion is that to a certain extent we have to comprehend the world as moving towards the knowledge of God. And what greater service could we do to that history, to the history which God is interested in, than in maintaining Gerim Toshavim within our midst who would be learning and studying in formal and mostly informal manners what it is that HaKadosh Baruch Hu wants of us, what it is that the Torah wants of us, and what it is especially that the mitzvot want of us. Perhaps I could end by saying that on Yom Kippurim we all studied Maftir Yoma. I mean, there's a lot more to be said, but perhaps I'll leave you with this notion. We studied Maftir Yona. Maftir Yona, as you know, is a strange book. It doesn't really fit in to our notion of what Yom Kippurim is. Yom Kippurim is a day when each of us feels the weight of the tshuva process, although it's a joyous day because we try to be confident. Nevertheless, tshuva, fasting, inuyim, the afflictions, are a process that is not easy for us to put up with, and we feel it in a very personal way. Yonah, the story of Yonah, is a story about a prophet who didn't want to go to tell the non-Jews that they had the option of tshuva, and HaKadosh Baruch Hu forced him to go. After he went, it was true, as he thought, or as had predicted, that the non-Jews took the option, did tshuva, HaKadosh Baruch Hu forgave them, and then there's an ensuing argument between God and Yonah. Yonah says, it's a terrible thing. I had no purpose to my life. I can't understand how such tshuva would be accepted. The Abarbanel explains on the spot that what Yonah's point was that after all, these non-Jews are not going to change. They did tshuva, they accepted the notion of God's anger, but in fact, they're not going to change their ways. And so if they return to idolatry, why should they be given the privilege of having their tshuva, their repentance accepted, when the Jewish people they have to do tshuva, real tshuva. They have to change their ways. They have to accept the mitzvot fully. They don't have this option to be good for a day or a week, as the Goyim seem to have. And then there's a kind of a strange story in which Yonah goes out and builds himself a sukkah. HaKadosh Baruch Hu then produces a kikayon, a tree, some kind of a tree, and then God takes away the tree. And Yonah is unhappy that the tree is missing, and of course the difficulty is Yonah built himself a sukkah. Why did he build a sukkah? For shade. I assume that he had enough shade. When God gave him the kikayon, this tree, that was sort of like extra shade, more shade. And then the kikayon was taken away, so Yonah is still left with the sukkah. I mean, he's still sitting in the sukkah, so what's he so unhappy about? I mean, when we sit in our sukkot, I mean, they give shade. There's some kind of a problem in understanding the story. Now, it may be that there's a kind of a symbolic dialogue between God and Yonah, to the effect that Yonah says, look, we build sukkot. We really do what God wants of us. I mean, you know what building a sukkah is, as we said, the fanot and schach, and where do I put the decorations, and what happens if the decorations fall down? I mean, this is really an enterprise. I mean, this is what we do. We build sukkot. And so Yonah said, we want to be protected because we build sukkot. And HaKadosh Baruch Hu said, here, have a tree. The tree also gives shades. And then the tree was taken away, and Yonah somehow felt the loss and the lack. And we have to understand, as Yonah perhaps understood, that we're Jews. And as Jews, we've accepted upon ourselves an overwhelming task to live up to the demands that the Ribono Shalom makes of us. And we'll do it. And we'll build the sukkah the way it has to be built. Even if they tell me every year that last year I've done it wrong, I'll keep trying to do it right. That's who I am. And that's what Yonah said about himself. And HaKadosh Baruch Hu said, listen, that's who you are. You are Yonah of the sukkah. But you're also Yonah in the world. You're also Yonah who has a responsibility to spread as much of the Torah values within the entirety of the world in order that the Messianic era might be made a little bit more pleasant. And that's the kikayon. And just as we love the way we are, we have to love the world that HaKadosh Baruch Hu made. Just as we love the fact that we have the privilege of doing the mitzvot, we have to also love the fact that we have the obligation of showing the light of Torah to those who have not yet proven themselves able to accept it in its fullest. Israel, Eretz Israel, the state of Israel, in peace, as a democracy, presents us with that potential, with that opportunity, not only that we can be as we are and do what we want and chas v'shalom think about pushing others around, but it also gives us the opportunity, first time in history, to re-educate others within the context of those notions that we understand and hold dear. The problem of Ger Toshav is not only a technical one. It does not only relate to the question of who technically can live in Israel, where can he technically live in Israel, and what can he technically do, but it relates moreover to our obligations vis-a-vis the world that God has created. Sukkot is that time of the year, and Yom Kippur is the preparation for that time of year, where we think of those obligations. It seems to me that the modern state of Israel, a democracy, in peace, might afford us, all of us, an unparalleled opportunity to spread the light of Torah. And on that basis, we should consider our future. Thank you.
I will not, during the body of my remarks, appreciably differ at all from my colleague Rabbi Bravo. What I would like simply to do with you is to attempt to place his remarks within the context of the present reality of living within the Israeli state. And I say this to you as someone who not only made Aliyah from Manhattan to Israel, but Baruch Hashem, who has been privileged to have made Aliyah from the west side of Manhattan to what is called the West Bank of Israel, erroneously, what is truly Yehuda v'Shomron. And here I want you to understand what, for me, is the great divide between America and Israel. When I returned to America for one of my unfortunately not infrequent trips, the entire Jewish American community had gekocht. There was a major issue going on that was concerning every rabbi, that was concerning every Jewish community, that was the major topic of various ads in the Jewish magazines and Jewish newspapers. And the question was, wine vinegar, kosher or not kosher? And what happens to the dishes of those people who happen to have bought that questionable wine vinegar? And certain communities were literally halachically divided between those who accepted the wine vinegar, whom you might call the wine vinegarians, and those who refused to accept the wine vinegar, the anti-wine vinegarians, and whether it was possible to eat in the home of the other. I want you to know, with all of the importance of kashrut and halacha, and my own feeling immediately when they asked me was, I don't want to hear the details, the wine vinegar is treif and it doesn't matter. Because what's the difference? So don't buy the wine vinegar. So kasha your dishes. Talking about the affluent America, throw out one pair of dishes. It won't hurt anybody. But I've got to tell you, I don't think that anybody believes that the Jewish nation was put in the world to have experienced what we've experienced and to have suffered what we have suffered. As I say all the time, if there's one rule of thumb within the Bible, it's, I never promised you a rose garden. Because the fact is that both in Vayikra, Parashat Bechukotai, in Devarim, Parashat Ki Tavo, the suffering of the Jewish people is clearly delineated. We were not put in the world in order to teach what we have been teaching and in order to suffer what we have been suffering because of wine vinegar, kosher or not kosher. The issue of Or LaGoyim is a much more complex issue. What does it mean to be a light unto the nations of the world? And issue about which Rabbi Bravender was really speaking was not only can we accept the Arab minority here in Israel as Geirim Toshavim and find some kind of modus vivendi within that context. But the problem is really a far more significant and a far more complex one. How do we indeed relate towards those Arabs who, although I certainly share Rabbi Bravender's hope, and I like to believe that he's not too optimistic, that peace may be close at hand. And peace is the opposite of war. It doesn't mean you have to love each other. It just means you have to stop fighting with each other. But how do we deal with the Arabs at a time when we are threatened by war? And indeed, yesterday, there was a young man killed in the old city. And terrorism is a fact of life. And if you see an unclaimed package, it is cause for alarm. Within that context, how do I treat the Arabs? And here I think that Judaism has some very definite and very clear statements to make. Number one, and here I would like to merely very briefly expand a little bit on the major thesis espoused by Rabbi Bravender a few moments ago. Number one, those who would argue in the name of Judaism, and unfortunately there are even some rabbis who so argue, that we are not permitted to allow Arabs to live within our midst, within present times, in my opinion, are not quoting certainly the majority of the normative halachic position. Their argument, as Rabbi Bravender hinted, is to be based upon the Rambam, Maimonides. Because there's one extra added fact that I think you've got to know. The Rambam, Hilchot Avodat Kochavim, laws dealing with idolatry, Perek Yud, the 10th chapter, speaks in great detail as to how we ought treat the Arabs. How we ought treat people who are classified by Maimonides as Akum, usually translated as Gentile, non-Jew. And he says, as long as the situation is such that we do not have the power, and this must be understood fully, but as long as the situation is such that we do not have the power, then you have to support the poor of the Gentile world together with the poor of the Jews. We must give them the regular gifts and tithes from the very land of Israel on which we live. And even during their pagan festivals, we must ask about their welfare. However, at the time when we are in control, it is forbidden for us to allow an idolater to live within our midst or a Gentile to live within our midst, depending upon the translation. Until they accept upon themselves the 7 Noahide laws. And Maimonides adds, "Ve'ein mekablim ger toshav ela bisman shayovel noheg." And the only time that we accept this ger toshav, this resident alien, is when the Jubilee year is in practice. And since the Jubilee year is now not in practice, hence, you can't accept the ger toshav. If you can't accept the ger toshav, you cannot have non-Jews living in our midst, and therefore the notion of transfer comes into play. Lift all the Arabs and send them over to Jordan. Now here I want to just make a critical point. The Kesef Mishnah, on that very same chapter 10 of Laws of Idolatry, insists that Maimonides certainly does not mean that you can't have a ger toshav live in Israel as long as the Jubilee year doesn't hold sway. All that Maimonides means to say, according to his major interpreter, the Kesef Mishnah, is that there is no separate status of ger toshav. In other words, originally there were 3 statuses. There was the Jew, there was the proselyte, the convert, and then there was the ger toshav, who was a kind of associate Jew. And that associate Jew only had to accept upon himself the 7 Noahide laws. And once an individual accepted upon himself the 7 Noahide laws, then his children and his children's children and children's children's children became Gerim Toshavim. All Maimonides says is that special status only applies when the Jubilee year holds sway. However, argues the Kesef Mishnah, even Maimonides would agree that as far as allowing such people to live within our midst in Israel, of course we can do so. I would like to go a step further and tell you that that same Maimonides, in another work of his called the Sefer HaMitzvot, the Book of the Commandments, Commandment 50, Mitzvah Nun, relating to that which is generally considered a prohibition against having Gentiles living in the land of Israel. Lo techaneim, you cannot have them dwell there. Maimonides says specifically this only applies to an idolater and does not apply to someone who does not accept upon himself the 7 Noahide laws. So that even Maimonides himself, in a second source, insists that the only individual who cannot live in Israel is an idolater. Now further, that which Maimonides says in his second source, that the whole issue is one of idolatry, is based upon a Gemara in the tractate Gittin, Memhei Amid Aleph, page 45a, and that is also the view of the Balei Tosfot in that place. Only idolaters would not live in Israel. And thirdly, there's the famous view of the Ravad, based clearly upon the verses within the Torah that deal with the issue, that limit the prohibition to live in Israel to only those original 7 nations who lived here at the time of Joshua's conquest. Because, according to most authorities, those 7 nations had such a moral and this at their core, that they had to be banished from the land, but does not apply to anyone else. Hence, if I take a look at the halachic material, the halachic material is very clear. The Rabbah says only the original 7 nations can't live in Israel. Tosfot, based on Gittin Memhei, says only idolaters cannot live in Israel. Even the Rambam, who says anyone who doesn't accept the 7 Noahide laws cannot live in Israel, says so only in one source. He has a second contradictory source in which he agrees that only idolaters cannot live in Israel. Hence, it seems that the overwhelming weight of halachic judgment would maintain that there is certainly permissibility for Mohammedans and Christians to live in Israel together with Jews. And in Mishpat Kohen, as Rabbi Bravender mentioned earlier, Rav Kook, page 366, makes the same clear point. Even, by the way, allowing a Jew to sell land to an Arab in Israel. I want to go one step further, however. What is this business of idolatry? And what are we saying as Jews when we want to limit idolaters? You know, there are certain principles in Jewish law and in Jewish theology that we all take almost for granted, without attempting to think in depth what they really mean. What's wrong with idolatry? What is it about idolatry that causes us to feel so strongly that the idolater is someone whom we don't want within our midst? And I want to make 2 brief points. Number 1, if I believe in one absolute God, I can believe in one absolute system of ethics. The moment in which I believe in many gods, that I enter into a realm of situation ethics, which in effect tells me that there is no absolute right or wrong. And Judaism is based upon the very important fundamental notion that if you don't have an absolute sense of right or wrong, it becomes impossible for any society to endure. I want to go one step further. Obviously, my notions of God and ideals has to come from within myself. The human being is a complex organism. You know the famous verse in the beginning of the Bible when God says, "Na'aseh Adam b'tzalmeinu kidmutenu," let us make the human being in our image and after our likeness. Who is the our? To whom is God speaking? Who is the us? I want to concentrate on one interpretation, and that's the interpretation of Nachmanides, of the Ramban. And the Ramban says God is speaking to the physical animal world which He's already made. And God says to that physical animal world, a world has been created, a physical material world, in which the various physical creatures are subject to growth, birth, growth, sickness, decay, and death. That requires sleep, that require nutrition, that requires some form of sexual reproduction. Says God, I am now going to create a human being. And that human being is going to be a composite creature. On the one hand, that human being is going to contain all of the limiting elements of the physical world which I've just created. Birth, growth, decay, death, requiring sleep, nutrition, a means of sexual reproduction. But in addition to those physical limitations, I'm going to create the human being with a spark of eternity. I'm going to, God says, give the human being an element of myself. Na'aseh Adam b'tzalmenu kidmutenu. Let us make the human being in our image and in our likeness. Human being is going to be God beast. That's what he is. And now comes the fundamental question which faces each and every one of us. What part of ourselves are we going to express? Are we going to express the God part, or are we going to express the beast part? It's no accident that the first great sin of idolatry of the Jewish people was the golden calf. With the calf, they stressed the bestial part. And whenever you have a society which glorifies the physical aspect of the human being, that's idolatry. Whenever the most important thing to a society becomes an athletic sports meet, whenever the goal is completely what you look like physically to the exclusion of everything else, that's idolatry. And that was the pantheon of Mount Olympus. And if you look at most of the ads in Western culture, you would think that the greatest two plagues that we have are body odor and overweight. And if we could only cure people of body odor and overweight, everything would be perfect. Because that's fundamentally the direction in which society moves. What is God? Or at least what is the aspect of God that we as human beings are allowed to understand? And the Torah in one place tells it to us. We read it, Shabbat Cholamot. Moses asks God, Hareini na et kvodecha. What are you? Who are you? If I'm going to emulate you and not the bestial part within myself, if I'm not going to be an idolater, if I'm going to become a server of the Lord, what is it that I've got to express? And God has Moses stand at the cleft of a rock. Hashem kel rachum b'chanun erechapayim rav chesed ve'emet. God is a God of love and compassion. For no cause, that's what chanun means. Rachum, the kind of compassion that a mother has for the child in her womb. Unconditional love and compassion. Loving kindness and truth. My Ravanda concluded with the book of Job, or with the book of Yonah. Yonah doesn't want to prophesy. Why doesn't Yonah want to prophesy? Because he says, I knew what kind of God you are, God. And I was afraid of that message. I knew that you were a God, Hashem kel rachum v'chanun erechapayim rav chesed v'nicham al hara'ah. You're a forgiving God. And I, Jonah, understand din. I understand law. I understand justice. I don't understand forgiveness. And God teaches the Jewish people at the very inception of our nation that fundamental to belief in God and the very antithesis of idolatry is to believe in a God of compassion and loving kindness, and mahu rachum afata, mahu chanun afata, just as he is compassionate, so must you be. Just as he is a God of loving kindness, so must you be. And Maimonides at the end of Moreh Nevuchim says, the most important commandment in the Torah, v'halachta b'drachav, and you shall walk in God's ways. That's what it means to serve God and not to be idolatrous. And what we've got to do is to demonstrate to the world that you could win a war and that you know how to protect yourself on the one hand, but how to act with compassion and sensitivity on the other. That's the very definition of serving God. That's the very antithesis of idolatry. That's what's written into our Torah. That's the most fundamental message of Judaism. And if you don't understand it, no matter how many verses you're quoting, you don't understand what Judaism is all about. I want to quote you a Rambam. Listen. I don't fool myself. Before we made Aliyah, my mother-in-law complained, half jestingly, but mostly in truth. And those who know my mother-in-law understand very well. She said, what's going on? There's an ASPCA, an association for the protection of cruelty to animals. Why isn't there an ASPCG, an association for the protection of cruelty to grandchildren? You're taking my grandchildren to the West Bank? Where are my rights? And twice, my wife was driving the car, and there were stones thrown in the Haitian. And they hit the car. And I want you to know that a stone thrown on a moving vehicle becomes, by definition, a lethal weapon. And it's very, very difficult to bring up children and to guide a country, on the one hand, ready to put their lives down and to fight those who would destroy us, and at the same time to be able to recognize that Tselem Elokim within each and every human being. This very complexity is built into Torah, but this is what it really means to be an Or LaGoyim. I want to quote you a Rambam, a halacha. And the Rambam measures his words. Laws of killing. Listen to the Rambam. In space, in the Gemara, in Masechet Sanhedrin, Dafayin Daled Amud Aleph. Kol horei nefesh ben Adam. Anyone who kills any human being, and at least according to the Meshech Chochmah, Be'esimcha of Dvinsk, killing a Gentile is a far more heinous crime than killing a Jew. Kol horei nefesh ben Adam. Anyone who kills the soul of a human being. Over below taseh shenema lo titzach. Transgresses the commandment, thou shalt not kill. But we don't believe in turn the other cheek. We do believe in a system of justice. And if someone is coming to kill someone else, you must destroy him. Certainly if he's coming to kill you, you must destroy him. Because otherwise you will simply give the world, give it over to those who would destroy morality and ethicism. But if someone is pursuing after his friend to kill him, even if the pursuer is a minor, every Jew must save the life of the one who is being assailed. here the Rambam describes the situation. Imiziru. If you warn the individual and say to him, what are you doing? You're chasing an innocent person. And you see someone pursuing after the one who is being assailed. Since he's still involved in a hot pursuit, he's allowed to be killed. Of course, the Rambam says if you can in some way wound him or maim him, something else. That's what you should do. But if there's no other way, then you can kill him. But when? Only if he is literally in hot pursuit. At any other time, you can't assume that somebody is going to kill you merely because he's an Arab. I want to remind you of two things and then to conclude with two very brief stories. Our Torah speaks a great deal about the complex relationships between Yitzchak and Yishmael, prototypically Jew and Arab. According to the biblical account, Sarai has no children. She comes to Abraham and she says to Abraham, take my maidservant, Hagar. Impregnate her. And Abraham does it. It's almost, I think, a little funny actually, because then Hagar acts rather dominant towards Sarai, and Sarai comes to Abraham with a complaint. Hamasi alecha, my anger is against you. What do you mean? Her anger is against Abraham. What does she want from Abraham? Abraham merely did what she asked him to. But here we learn something very crucial about husband-wife relationships. It's true that Sarai came to Abraham and said to Abraham, listen, Abraham, do me a favor. This is what I want you to do. I can't give you a child. I want you to take my mistress. I want you to take my maidservant as your mistress, and I want you to impregnate her. What did Sarai really want? What did she want Abraham to really say? No. Absolutely not. I love you. I don't care about whether you do give me children or you don't give me children. We'll have faith in God. Ultimately, we'll have children. And all too often, and that's destructive in so many relationships, the woman says A and expects the husband to understand B. Well, the husband says A and expects the wife to understand B. Disaster. Can't work. Because once you say A, you always run the risk that he's going to accept A. And that's what Abraham did. Vataneha Sarai, Sarah afflicted Hagar, vativrach mipaneha, and Hagar fled from before Sarai's face. Says the Ramban, Chata'a imenu bi'inui hazeh. Our mother Sarah sinned with this affliction. V'gam Avram banichol lasot ke. And Abraham also sinned, allowing her to do that. V'shama Hashem elanya, and God listened to her affliction, because God listens to the affliction even of our enemies if they are unjustly afflicted. V'natan la sheyehei pera adam, and ultimately gave to Hagar a son who would be a wild beast of a man, Yishmael, la'anot zera Abraham v'Sarah b'chol minei inui, who in turn would afflict the seed of Sarah and Abraham. What the Ramban is saying is that affliction breeds affliction. That ill treatment breeds ill treatment. And that somehow you've got to learn how to live within the complexity of being ready to fight if fight is necessary, but in not for one moment forgetting the fundamental Tselem Elokim with which every human being is created. And you know, the story of Yitzchak and Yishmael concludes in a fascinating way. Abraham dies an old man. And Yitzchak and Yishmael, his sons, buried him. And the Midrash says, from here we learn that Yishmael repented. And the whole story concludes referring to the descendants of Yishmael, al pnei kol echav nafal. According to the Ibn Ezra, according to Rashi, according to the Midrash, it means that the portion of Yishmael will always fall together with the portion of Yitzchak. We are destined to live together. And if we're destined to live together, we have to learn how to live together. With all the complexity. I want to tell you two stories. I determined that I've got to learn how to speak Arabic. I live in Efrat. I think we have every right to live here. I think we've got to be strong. I think we've got to protect ourselves. But I think we've got to be ready for peace. And we've got to, not only for their sake, but for our sake, treat every human being b'tselem Elokim. Remember, we have a Torah that teaches us that you have to treat an animal with tremendous sensitivity. And the Rishonim are divided. Some say it's for the animal's sake, and some say it's for our sake. Alachat kama v'chama, for both their sake and for our sake. For the kind of nation we want to see that develops here, we've got to be able to orchestrate within that very difficult road of complexity. Let me tell you, I decided I want to learn Arabic. So, there was one young man who worked for the makolet here, for the fruit store, for the grocery store, and he also fixed television sets, very intelligent. And he was my Rebbe for Arabic. And twice a week we studied in the office, and on Friday afternoon he used to come into the house and eat gefilte fish, because he liked gefilte fish. There are people from Efrat here. Majid. I went to Israel, I brought him a gift. Very nice, he refused to take any money from me, everything was fine. Until there was a bomb explosion at the Tzomet, at the crossing, in the entry of Efrat, and he was the chief suspect. And he isn't here anymore. And my children said, well, Abba, are you going to still take Arabs into the house? And I said, absolutely so. First of all, because he wasn't proven guilty. And second of all, because even if he is, it doesn't mean that everybody is. And we're working together with the Mukhtarim in this area to put up a medical center, Arab and Jewish doctors together, because al pnei kol echav nafal. Destiny has put us together perhaps in the very beginnings of the Bible. We've got to learn to live together. We take many risks for war. We've got to take risks for peace, for our sake and for their sake. And day to day, I want you to know, day to day, my son comes home. This was 2 years ago. And he says, Abba, I need $5. I said, what do you need $5 for? Because American money, you didn't speak in terms of American money. I need $5 because I have to buy a donkey. My friend Abid and I are going to share a donkey. A donkey is $10. My $5 and his $5. We nixed the idea because they thought in the winter they'd bring the donkey into the house. They'd share that too. So not I so much, but my wife nixed it. Baruch Hashem. A final story. We first started the Yeshiva High School here. There were a group of kids who were extremely anti-Arab. And I heard them. And it bothered me, especially kids tend to see things in black and white, kids of high school age, and it's very difficult to teach complexities. By the time they become juniors and seniors, they begin to do it. By the way, there are a group of Arab vineyards owned by Arabs in the area, and we send our high school students one morning a week. The 9th and 10th graders work in the kibbutzim right around this area, and the 11th and 12th graders do acts of chesed in Yerushalayim, mostly old age homes, orphanages, etc. 2 years ago, the Arabs couldn't manage to gather their grapes in time, and there's a very short season. I sent the kids to help the Arabs harvest the grapes. And the next day I got a whole large bushel full of grapes, and that started my wine production. But the relationship, day to day, is very good. We were a group of kids who were anti. And I felt I was here too short a time. It was the first year that I had come on Aliyah. It was too short a time for me to talk to them. I wanted to see how it would play itself out. I certainly didn't want to be the American telling them about Arabs. One kid who lived in Psagot, still lives in Psagot, comes back after Shabbat vacation, all excited. And he tells the following story. Psagot is right outside of Ramallah. Ramallah is a large Arab town. Psagot is right at the outskirts of Ramallah. And this young man's next door neighbor was also very anti-Arab. He had a little toddler, 2 years old. And one Friday evening, the mother was benching licht, and after licht benching, she came outside, and the toddler's missing. And you can go from Psagot to Ramallah, it's no deal. You just, you keep crawling. Everybody was quite nervous. They began looking all around. They made a search. They couldn't find the child. And you can imagine all night long they were thinking the most horrible thoughts. Finally, the next day, they went to the police station in Ramallah. And there was the baby. The baby had wandered into the yard of an Arab family. The Arab family took the baby in. They gave the baby the inside of pita. They were afraid to give the baby anything else. They knew that it was a religious Jewish family. And then the next day they brought the baby to the police station. The Jewish family was overjoyed. They wanted to meet the Arab parents. They did. And this boy tells the story. And I'm telling you, he was so anti-Arab. He says, you wouldn't believe it. He's telling his friends, you wouldn't believe it. The mothers kissed and the fathers kissed. And his next door neighbor said to the Arab parent, what can we do? How can I repay you? And the Arab parent said, it's very simple. If one of our children will wander into your area, do for us what we did for you. Now listen, the reality is very difficult. The Palestinian Charter still calls for the destruction of Israel. We dare not be naive. We must be strong and we must protect ourselves and our right to live in this country. At the same time, however, we dare not lose our birthright. That birthright means belief in God and not idolatry. Belief in God means Hashem Kel Rachum V'Chanun ma'u af'ata, to every human being, until proven rodef. Compassion and love. And then, Im Hashem oz la'amo yitem, if God will grant strength to his people Israel, please God, Hashem yivarech et amo v'shalom, God will bless his people with peace. Thank you very much.
I've been asked to ask. Those of you who are staying for lunch can go directly to the sukkah to eat. If any of you would like to tarry and talk to each other, it would be very nice because the sukkah cannot accommodate all of us at once. Vadim, listen.